Awesome, thanks for coming back for day 2 of this Krampus coloring challenge. So today we'll finish it up with all the rest of the little details and anything else that we want to add. And I promised to tell you the secret lesson of the Christmas anti-hero, in my opinion anyway, so here it is. It seems on the surface that it's about judging other people morally on whether they've been good or bad, but the deeper meaning is really that we cause our own misery when we judge others. So just something to think about as we go into the holidays and we embody the holiday spirit, whether you're here on Team Krampus or Team St. Nicholas. Anyway, let's get started with the coloring. I'm carrying on here with my same bright or kind of lightish red from yesterday, and I just did that strap of his backpack where he kidnaps the bad children, a very flat red. Moving on to his sticks, which Krampus uses to beat those who have been naughty. Oh my goodness. Pretty much keeping them a solid brown. I'm coloring it a little darker than the background, and I'm going to add just a bit of shading with my darker brown pencil here in the ones sort of that underlap and on the bottom of a few of his sticks. Very, very basic shading here, but you can see a little bit goes a long way. A little bit of lighter color, a little bit of darker stuff in the shadows. For his tongue, it's also pretty much flat. I'm leaving just a little bit of a highlight, a gentle highlight around the edges. Yes, I use my eraser. If you have one, definitely put it to use. I like those white erasers. You can get them at any drugstore. Maybe just a little bit of the dark red in the middle, but very, very subtle shading on most of these objects here. These are just fine details. It was funny, my husband and I had a debate over whether his eyes should be red. Anyway, his hair, I really kept it simple here too. I won out, just so you know. After all, it is my art. It's so funny. On his hair and horns, I kept it very, very simple. Tiniest bit of white highlight on the top of the horns and the front of his hair. And then I darkened in the back of his head with a darker red pencil, and I darkened in the top of his horns, or the back side of his horns, just a little bit. And this is very, very subtle shading. If you want to do this part flat, you can do this part flat. But you can also use it just as an experiment to see a little shading can go a long way with just 2 pencils. Cool. So onward to the rest of his accessories. He has chains and jingly jangly scary bells and things that you can hear him coming, and it's really, really scary. It's such a great story. Anyway, so carrying on with his backpack, I am using my bright red here and shadowy there where it touches his back, because that is sort of just like a shadowy nook. And then the top of it, I'm keeping lighter. I'm just doing a really light touch here, a tiny bit of darkening around the lines there, like the weave of the basket. It's sort of like a woven basket type device. And then my darker red, I'm just kind of hatching a little bit more of the basket texture. Not too much there, just a little bit of shading to darken the shadows where it touches his body, and a little bit of the basket texture. Then with that medium brown, I am darkening in the bottom of his pack and leaving highlights on the top. Again, this is not an absolute science to shading. It's just an easy way that I kind of see it, especially here where it underlaps with his back. You would see that be a little shadowier or more shadowy or having more shadows, or however you say that. So that's why it's darker. And then I'm just imagining the moonlight hitting the top of the pack there. So that's a little bit lighter. And then it gives it contrast from the red of the basket, just because there's a little bit of a dark, a little bit of a light. Those different highlights and shadows give it shape and also differentiate the different parts of the painting or coloring, drawing. So for the jingly jangly tarnished bells, I am just doing the bottom half of them with my dark brown. That might be the medium brown, but I'm pressing pretty hard. And I'm just, same for the bow, pressing pretty hard, doing it very simply, just doing like half of the bell and then leaving a little bit of white. I'm keeping it streaky. Cool, that looks great. Really at this point, it's just details. If you want to go further with it, if you want to darken little bits or not, it's pretty much done. It really just depends on the look that you're going for and how much detail in the shading and color that you want to add. I'm tarnishing up those small bells with a little bit of the dark brown. Same with his boot, I wanted to add a little more detail, so I'm just kind of going over the dark parts. And then to differentiate the boot from the background a little bit, I'm using my dark red, and I'm adding just a touch of red to his boot and to some of his ironware and his bells and his jingly jangly things. And that tiny bit of color adds a lot of contrast between the bells and the shoe and the background. And again, these are all just the tiny little details. I like to look at it from a distance and see if there's anything that I think should be darker, or in some cases lighter, and you can erase it a little bit. So add any of your finishing touches. Yep, like there, I'm erasing some of the highlights on the boot once I've darkened it. And I really liked that reddish tone to the boot, so I added more. So I'm just continuing on with more shading and shadowing around the border. Your piece may or may not need this. It's totally up to you, but I'm just adding any finishing details that I see. At this point, I usually go pretty heavy on the shadows. I like a shadowy look, so I don't mind darkening it in. And to me, that looks awesome. And I will just finish up the letters here and we will move on. Cool, beautiful, that looks so good. Now this is pretty much done here. If you want to photocopy this in color and cut it out and send it to your relatives, you can totally do that. You don't really have to color each one by hand. And a cool trick that you can do is to color copy it at this point, and then if you have the metallic watercolors or pens that we'll use in the next step, you can add little hand-painted details with the gold and red metallic paint. Yes, that looks awesome, just as it is, but I'm going to add some holiday sparkle with these metallic watercolors. These are Kuretake gem colors. You can also use Jelly Roll metallic pens and Arteza and Artist Loft. Probably even at Walmart or your local craft store, you can find a similar brand of metallic watercolor paint or a metallic gel pen. So I'm just using red, and I'm just adding a touch of holiday sparkle around the edge here in red. I did a test one where I colored like everything red with a metallic, and it was too much. So apply it as you wish, but I decided that it looked best if you just do a couple of details like the border and the tongue. So I did those in red, and then I used one of the lighter gold starry Kuretake watercolors. I think this was nearly the lightest one, number 905 there, yeah. And with these watercolors, you want to add enough water that you get a really good paint, but you don't want too much water that it's watery. You want a liquid, but pretty metallic, like pretty painty. so you get a lot of the pigment in there. And then just very carefully, daintily dabbing gold onto the bells, onto the sticks, and just a couple of the details here. And that just gives it a nice holiday shimmer. So awesome. Just adds a little bit of a touch to it, a little bit on the boot too. I just couldn't help myself. Awesome, but then look at it in the light and look how beautiful that is with just a few touches of the metallics on top of the pencil. And then this is my favorite part, the splatters. Get a lot of paint, thick paint on your brush, a small brush, and then tap it over another brush, and you can add some gold, sparkle, just splatter to the background. Of course, some people think this is a messy look and they don't want to do it, and that's fine too, but I think it's really fun. It's one of my favorite parts. And then speaking of getting messy, here I'm just adding a little bit more gold paint, and then very, very gently adding gold paint, and with a paper towel, I am just rubbing it on in there, and it adds a little bit of kind of a dirty gold sparkle to the edge in the corner. Make sure to wipe it before it dries. So you have a couple minutes there, or a couple seconds or whatever, but I like this sort of messy, dirty look to it. You may not, so that's optional. It's just something you can play with. And then once you're all finished, get your handy scissors and cut it out. But I think that turned out so fun. This was one of my favorite characters that I have drawn yet. So I really hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you're able to find some peace and magic within yourself, at least this season. Awesome. So feel free to reach out or comment on the videos if you enjoyed this. And of course, you can find more magical books and things to color at coloringbookofshadows.com. Thanks again, and happy holidays.